Hi, I'm Quentin Schultz, author of the book An Essential Guide to Public Speaking. An Essential Guide to Public Speaking, and it includes a special chapter on doing group presentations. Group presentations. Let me admit up front that very few human beings like working in groups, especially if they're working toward a presentation, because once they do that presentation, everyone really has to depend on everyone else for the quality of the presentation. As I talked about in an earlier video, I can still recall when I was a university student many years ago, being part of group presentations, and I was the weak link. I was the poor presenter. It was awful. I knew it, but I couldn't rise above the level that I had at that point. I needed help, I needed practice, and I did get it over the years, but I knew I was the weak link. So with group presentations, we have a special situation. Chapter 19 offers a lot of help on this. Take a look at the different dimensions of it, including in that chapter how to work together well toward the presentation. I don't have time here to cover that. I want to talk about just the presentation itself rather than the work involved in getting there, although I'll mention that a little bit. So all of the public speaking rules that we think about, in fact, all of them in my 70-page book, something like that, that have to do with public speaking, also have to do with group presentations. Just like the ancient rhetoricians talked about public speaking in terms of the individual speaking to a group, we can turn that around and say that the rules of rhetoric, of how to communicate well and connect with an audience, also have to do with the group presenting to another group or even to an individual. So a CEO or some other leader can call a group in and say, okay, tell me what you found. Give me your presentation, so to speak. Give me a report. A lot of group presentations are essentially reports where numerous persons worked on it, and though sometimes one person will give the whole report as a kind of summary on behalf of the group, usually everybody participates. And that's what I'm talking about, these difficult situations where numerous people who are involved in planning this presentation then also participate. I'm going to divide up my comments into just 4 of the areas covered in the chapter, but these are really important. The first one has to do with rehearsals. I'm big on rehearsals for public speaking. When I am going to speak extemporaneously, I rehearse at least 3 to 5 times after I've gone over my notes again and again and again and narrowed down the outline. And usually it's more than that. And I recommend to newer public speakers that they consider a rehearsal 5 to 7, maybe even more times than that. It's even more important to do rehearsals for a group presentation because group presentations have a lot of slop in the system. A lot of slop. People come in and they have different ideas on how this should work. They have different styles of presentation. They have different things that they're talking about. Perhaps they're talking about them in a way different from the way other people are presenting. You have issues involved in the technology, if you're using presentational technology in particular, or if there's a microphone and there's a single mic and who gets the mic when, all of this stuff. There's a lot of slop in the system. And it's just waiting to become sloppier. In fact, group presentations cry out for chaos. They love chaos. They love chaos. And our job is to rein in the chaos. We'll never get rid of all of it because multiple people are involved. But we can reduce it. And the principal way we do that is by rehearsing together again and again and again, and at some point having an actual audience of people, friends, colleagues, whatever, come in and view it and give us feedback on what's working and what's not working in a group presentation. You can't do it without a lot of rehearsals. It's foolishness to tempt chaos, and the chaos will come. The second is to have a host. Now this is interesting because I use the word host here, and often They will talk about in books on doing group presentations, they'll talk about having a facilitator or a leader. Fine, I'm not against those two terms. Bring on a facilitator, bring on a leader. But I like the word host, because a host says that this person is there to host the audience and to host the rest of the group. It's a kind of hospitality, to provide the hospitality. This is the place that we're in together. I'm going to help make it a hospitable place so we can all do our individual work as part of this presentation well. We all feel comfortable. Think of having friends over to your house, and there you are around, let's say, a living room together, and sofa, some chairs, maybe a couple people sitting on the floor by a fireplace, and you're the host. It's your pad, and they've come over. Your job is to help facilitate the conversation a little bit as needed, to make sure everybody's comfortable, to make sure there's not noise so people can't hear one another. You're responsible for helping make that happen as the host. The host. I really like that term. So if someone is going to be the leader of your presentation, it doesn't mean that they just stand up there and they introduce people and that goes on. No, it means that they are willing to be the host, to look out for everything that's going to help the audience and all the presenters so that the communication is as good as it can be. A host. Transitions. Oh boy, what a problem transitions are. To go from one person to another in a group presentation, and then add a microphone, and add PowerPoint. It gets complicated fast. What do you do? In the rehearsals, you practice different kinds of transitions. You don't depend on people making their own transitions at the time of the presentation as if suddenly they can do it well, because they will not do it well. The rehearsal of the transitions is as important as the rehearsal of the content itself. There are different ways to do this, and I cover them in the book. One way is for the host to introduce the different people and to move along from one to the other, introduce them as needed during the presentation, and then introduce the Q&A at the end to help host that. That's one way to do it. There are other ways as well. But my point here is that to avoid chaos, you have to have these transitions built in, and they have to be somewhat parallel. In other words, person A with a transition over to person B and B over to C and so on has to be done in a somewhat similar way. You don't want to do this wildly different so that one person uses the next person's name and then the following person does not use a name, and so on. So very important. And then the Q&A. A lot of group presentations fall apart at the Q&A level. They go through, everything is fine, and it's time for questions and answers. Who takes the questions? Who does it? How are you going to organize this? I talk about different ways of organizing it, but let me just point out here that the key is that the group determines a way to do the Q&A in advance and practices that as part of the rehearsal as well. I'm a big fan on using index cards for questions, to hand out index cards to an audience and then to have them write down questions and collect those. That way I can quickly go through them and see which questions are common. If a lot of people are asking the same question, I want to jump right in on those. Also, it helps people be brief so they don't ask questions that are real long and so on. There's advantages and disadvantages I talk about in the book of doing it that way. Some groups like to have the host field the questions, summarize them, call on somebody to give the answers. Again, there are different ways, but the key is to come up with a way that you've agreed upon to do it, and then stay with it, and along the way to rehearse it. Working in groups is difficult. Most people don't like it. Working toward group presentations can be even worse. Chaos is right around the corner. Chaos. We have to nip that chaos in the bud, not just in the work we do together, but in the setting up and the planning, rehearsing, and evaluating of the presentation itself. Because even a well put together presentation, in the actual execution of the presentation, can create chaos, which reflects very badly on every member of the group and on the presentation itself. It makes it seem like the group does not know what it's doing, does not know what it's talking about, even though the problem is with the presentation style and lack of organization and rehearsal, rather than the content itself. You can do this. Work with people through the rehearsal process. Use the ideas I have in the book to help you along, and you can do group presentations really well. And believe me, the audience will appreciate it, because audiences have very low expectations for group presentations. Let's not be part of those low expectations that are held, but rather let's elevate the expectations for the group after us. You can do this. Thank you.